it is increasingly evident that worldwide sub-replacement fertility, which is a precondition for global depopulation, is set to commence much sooner than demographers predicted even a few years ago. In fact, for a quarter of the world's population, decline is already underway. Back in the late 1960s, a Stanford University biologist named Paul Ehrlich published an influential book titled The Population Bomb. The book opened with the dramatic assertion, "The battle to feed humanity is over." In the 1970s, the world will experience famines and hundreds of millions of people will starve to death. Ehrlich linked the population explosion to other potential apocalyptic scenarios. India would be doomed, England would disappear by the year 2000, and life expectancy in the US would drop to 42 years by 1980. According to him, every global crisis seemed to stem from rapidly growing populations. However, none of these doomsday scenarios proposed since then came to pass. Human ingenuity, economic growth, and technological progress saved the day. More people have lived longer, healthier, and more prosperous lives than ever before. Global poverty has fallen dramatically, particularly in countries like India and, most notably, China. And as for England, while it has been battered and bruised by various challenges, it is still very much around. Although few see it coming, we are entering a new period in human history. Call it the Era of Depopulation. It's arriving quietly and catching most by surprise. With birth rates plummeting globally, more and more countries are entering a phase of indefinite depopulation, a trend that will eventually encompass the entire planet. What lies ahead is a world of shrinking and aging societies. Net mortality, where deaths exceed births, will become the new norm. Unrelentingly low fertility rates will result in family structures and living arrangements once thought of as science fiction becoming everyday realities. Our species has no collective memory of global depopulation. Total human numbers have not declined for a very long time. The last significant global depopulation occurred nearly 700 years ago in the wake of the Black Death. The previous depopulation period ended through the procreative powers of humanity, but we don't know what the outcome of this new trend will be. This time, depopulation is not due to external forces, but rather to humanity's procreative powers, or the lack thereof. Thanks to revolutionary worldwide reductions in the desire for children, we now find ourselves on the brink of a new demographic order. Global population growth has been a constant backdrop to modern life, one that we take for granted. Our social institutions, economic frameworks, and political dynamics all rely on it. But we lack the intuitive understanding of how prolonged depopulation will reshape society, the economy, and geopolitics. Yet, reshape them it certainly will. The breathtaking scale of the worldwide march into sub-replacement fertility is not yet fully appreciated, even by demographic specialists. Allow me to brief you on the seemingly unstoppable force pushing us closer to global depopulation. Ever since the population explosion of the 1960s, global fertility rates have steadily declined. According to the United Nations Population Division, the world's fertility rate, the average number of births per woman, was halved by 2015 compared to 50 years earlier. Every country saw a drop in birth rates during this period, and the decline has only accelerated in recent years. No matter how low fertility rates already were, they continued to fall. As a general rule, 2.1 births per woman are required to maintain a stable population. However, today, the overwhelming majority of the world's population lives in countries with below replacement fertility rates, inherently incapable of sustaining long-term population stability. Startling fertility collapses have occurred in both wealthy and poor nations alike. For instance, East Asia entered the depopulation in 2021, and by 2022, every major country in the region was shrinking. Fertility levels today are 40% below replacement in Japan, 50% below in China, 60% below in Taiwan, and a staggering 65% below in South Korea. In Southeast Asia, the region slipped into below replacement fertility around 2018, with countries like Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam all members of the sub-replacement club. Even the predominantly Catholic Philippines is below replacement level, and Myanmar, despite being war-torn and impoverished, also has a fertility rate below replacement. In South Asia, India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal have already reached sub-replacement fertility, and Bangladesh is on the verge. In urban India, fertility levels are now as low as Europe's, with Kolkata reporting an astonishing 1 birth per woman, lower than any major European city. Latin America and the Caribbean have also seen fertility plummet. In cities like Bogota and Mexico City, birth rates are below 1 child per woman. Even North Africa and the Greater Middle East, long considered immune due to religious traditions, have seen similar declines. Iran has been sub-replacement for 25 years, and birth levels in Istanbul are now lower than those in Berlin. In Europe, fertility has been below replacement for nearly half a century. Countries like Russia and members of the European Union are now net mortality zones. So last year, France recorded fewer births than in 1806 during the Napoleonic era. According to the UNT, the continent entered long-term population decline in 2020. The United States remains an outlier among developed nations, still resisting the gravitational pull of depopulation, but even there, it is no longer unthinkable. The U.S. Census Bureau now projects that America's population could peak around 2080 and decline thereafter. The last major basin of high fertility is sub-Saharan Africa, with its 1.2 billion people and a fertility rate of over 4 children per woman. Yet, even in this region, fertility has fallen by a third since the population explosion days. Countries like South Africa have birth rates just above replacement, and nations like Mauritius and Cape Verde are already sub-replacements. Given all this, it is possible, though not yet certain, that global fertility has already dropped below replacement levels. We cannot say definitively due to the lack of updated data from sub-Saharan Africa. Nevertheless, it is clear that worldwide sub-replacement fertility, which sets the stage for global depopulation, is unfolding much sooner than demographers predicted, with population decline already underway for a quarter of the world's population. What explains this extraordinary worldwide march into sub-replacement fertility? The truth is, this most important of all modern social movements remains something of a mystery. Some might argue that economic development and material progress are the culprits, but this explanation is too simplistic. For instance, Myanmar and Nepal are designated by the UN as least developed countries, yet both are already sub-replacement. There are exceptions to every generalization about what drives fertility decline, making it a deeply complex and unpredictable phenomenon. Economist Lance Pritchard identified a remarkable predictor of national fertility, the number of children that women say they want. This surprising insight suggests that human agency is a key factor in birth rates. But why, in rich and poor countries alike, have we witnessed a global dive into sub-replacement fertility? The genius who can finally answer that question will deserve a Nobel Prize, but perhaps not in economics. It would require understanding the global zeitgeist, the shifting mentalities, and uncovering the motivations within billions of human hearts. While social science provides some answers, it can only take us so far. Clearly, a revolution in family formation is underway worldwide, not just in childbearing. Across cultures and traditions, we see trends like the flight from marriage, cohabitation, temporary unions, and living alone becoming more prevalent. People increasingly value autonomy, self-actualization, and convenience, qualities that modern life prizes, but which make raising children, often seen as inconvenient, less appealing. There is also no modern case of a country returning to replacement-level fertility after falling deeply below it. Once societies dip to fertility rates 30 to 35% below replacement, the return to larger families seems elusive. This raises serious questions about the old assumptions from social biology, which suggested that humans are hardwired to replace themselves to ensure species survival. Conversely, theories like mimetic theory, which emphasize social learning and volition, may be worth exploring to understand how family patterns evolve. Public intellectual Mary Eberstadt draws an analogy between humans and animals, likening the issue to a cat stuck in the tree problem. Just as domesticated pets may not learn survival skills from their peers, humans may find it easier to choose low fertility regimens but far harder to revert to higher birth rates. By 2050, net mortality, where deaths outnumber births, could affect 58% of the world's population. This includes regions like Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even parts of sub-Saharan Africa. As labor forces shrink, sub-replacement fertility could leave 2/3 of the global population living in countries with dwindling workforces. A depopulating world will also be an aging one, with societies dominated by the elderly. Top-heavy population pyramids, where the old outnumber the young, will become the norm. By 2050, outside of sub-Saharan Africa, there will be hundreds of millions fewer people under 60. But the number of super-old, 80+ years will triple. The countries at the vanguard of depopulation, like China and South Korea, offer a glimpse of the future. By 2050, China's median age will be over 50, and its working-age population will be 25% smaller than today. South Korea presents an even starker scenario, with projections suggesting it could have 3 deaths for every birth by 2050. In the extreme, should current trends persist, South Korea's population could decline by 95% within a century. This transition into a world of depopulation raises many questions. Despite the challenges, improving living standards, material advances, and technological innovations will still be possible. The economic growth model of the 20th century, fueled by human potential and favorable business environments, can still drive prosperity in the 21st century even in an aging, shrinking world. Improved health, education, science, and technology can continue to generate wealth and progress. Currently, Israel boasts one of the highest fertility rates in the developed world, driven mainly by the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. This demographic will dominate the population landscape. As Orthodox community grows, they will increasingly influence societal norms and policies. Their values may clash with more secular segments, creating friction and division within the society. As Muslim populations are expected to collapse, this will lead to a complex tapestry of cultural and religious identities, fueling tensions and conflict over resources and governance. Rooted in the desire for a Jewish homeland, some strands of Zionism advocate for the establishment of Greater Israel, which includes territories from Egypt to Syria and Iraq. This view has contributed to both expansionist policies and a focus on Jewish settlement in disputed areas. In Israel, right-wing political parties often support expansionist policies, arguing that such actions are necessary for national security and historical claims to the land. In a depopulating world, individuals will increasingly need to focus on responsibility and savings. As people live longer and healthier lives, many will retire later, meaning that lifelong learning and continuous skill development will be crucial to remain economically active. Prosperity in this new demographic reality will also depend on maintaining open economies, promoting free trade, and facilitating the movement of people to counterbalance the constraints imposed by shrinking populations. The global demand for talent will rise, and immigration will play a more critical role than ever. Countries will need to adopt competitive immigration policies to attract skilled migrants, but not all aging societies will be equally capable of assimilating them. Depopulation will also transform international relations and geopolitical power. The shifting population growth rates across regions will cause rapid changes in the relative size of the world's major powers. For example, Sub-Saharan Africa will see a dramatic rise in its share of the global population, currently accounting for nearly a third of all births. India, now the world's most populous country, is poised to become a major global power by 2050. However, it faces similar challenges in terms of human resource vulnerabilities. Despite having a world-class elite of scientists and professionals, 7 out of 8 young Indians still lack basic skills, hindering the country's potential. China, though facing population decline, has a much stronger skills base among its youth, putting it ahead of India in economic terms for the foreseeable future. On the geopolitical front, a coalition of revisionist countries China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia aims to challenge the US-led global order. Yet, demographic trends are not in their favor. Russia and China are both sub-replacement societies with declining populations, while Iran has similarly low fertility rates. Even North Korea, which closely guards its demographic data, shows signs of concern over its birth rates. However, these demographic challenges do not preclude these nations from engaging in brinkmanship and confrontation, as evidenced by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's plans regarding Taiwan. The United States, in contrast, has relatively strong demographic fundamentals. Thanks to immigration, the US is projected to account for a growing share of the rich world's labor force and highly educated talent. This demographic advantage positions the US to maintain, and possibly expand, its global influence in the coming decades. Despite current domestic challenges and declining public trust in institutions, America's long-term population potential is an asset that could sustain its dominance through 2050 and beyond. In summary, the transition to a depopulating world will demand new economic, social, and political strategies. Lifelong learning, competitive immigration policies, and innovative responses to aging societies will be essential to thrive in this changing global landscape. While some countries, like the US and Australia, appear better positioned for this future. Others face significant challenges, especially in regions where human capital development lags behind. Adapting to depopulation will require substantial reforms across governments, corporations, and social institutions. Failure to adjust could lead to economic stagnation, as countries grappling with aging populations may face pessimism, resistance to reform, and decline. Even if some societies do eventually succeed in adjusting, there is no guarantee they will do so quickly enough to avoid significant economic and social disruption. Another significant unknown is how prolonged aging and low birth rates will impact a nation's readiness to defend itself. Historically, war has required not only strategy but also a willingness to endure sacrifices, something that may be in short supply as societies increasingly prioritize comfort and convenience over family and community bonds. However, there is a possibility that younger men, disconnected from family ties, might seek purpose and belonging through military service, potentially making them more willing to endure hardship in defense of their country. The Russia-Ukraine war serves as a test case for how depopulating nations manage casualty tolerance, as both countries were in demographic decline prior to the invasion. China, with its rapidly aging population and one-child policy legacy, presents another major question mark. A mass casualty event could devastate entire family lineages, and while China might fight fiercely in defense of its homeland, it remains unclear whether it would tolerate heavy losses in expeditionary wars, such as a potential conflict over Taiwan. Ultimately, depopulation is set to transform the global landscape in profound ways. While it will bring challenges, it is also likely that many core economic advancements and prosperity will persist, as human volition continues to shape future developments, just as it has driven today's decline in childbearing. The future may be uncertain, but the underlying capacity for innovation and progress remains strong. While it's possible for depopulating societies to sustain and even improve their prosperity, there are deeper concerns, such as the implosion of family structures. In Japan, a woman born in 1990 faces only about a 50% chance of seeing biological grandchildren, a trend that could profoundly affect societal cohesion and support systems. We don't fully understand yet how a society with widespread childlessness will function. There's a school of thought that a managed population decline might benefit the environment by reducing humanity's strain on natural resources. However, others argue that it's human ingenuity, not depopulation, that holds the key to saving the planet. Economic growth has lifted millions out of poverty, though inequality remains a concern. There's also been substantial progress in key areas like life expectancy and education, leading to significant improvements in global inequality when viewed from the perspective of lifespan and years of schooling. When it comes to the fertility crisis, some argue that it's exaggerated, with critics like John Quiggin asserting that the economic costs of raising children far exceed the costs of elder care. However, studies in the US suggest the opposite. Elderly consumption is typically higher than that of the young. More than just costs, the issue is about priorities. Despite unprecedented wealth and resources, people today in wealthy nations like the US, Europe, and Australia are choosing to have fewer children, which suggests deeper societal shifts beyond affordability. Regarding policy responses, financial incentives like paid maternity leave, family benefits, and subsidized childcare in places like Australia have had limited long-term demographic impact. The key may be fostering economic prosperity so people can make their own choices. But the deeper question remains: how do we balance personal choices with societal needs?